right, welcome to another casual conversation with Jeremiah and James.
We are hanging out at the beach, and so we're having a little downtime, doing a little soul searching.
Well, I mean, I'm keeping an eye on the carnitas upstairs, so...
And I can smell the carnitas, so...
Oh, the whole upstairs smells like carnitas right now. But anyway, I don't think they're going to be ready by 8 or by 7. I think it might be 8.
Oh, okay.
It's like 15 pounds of meat that has to cook.
That's enough.
All right, anyway. So we did a couple more serious casual conversations a couple months ago, and you guys really liked them. And then we just forgot and couldn't schedule it and didn't get around to doing more. But we are trying to do a better job about that because there's a lot of crap we want to talk about. So today we're going to be starting to talk about conspiracy theories.
Ooh.
Now, I guess I'm going to start with the easy ones to make fun of. And if anyone listening to this actually believes some of the things we're making fun of, we're being very lighthearted about it. If you found some compelling evidence and some smoking gun for a flat earth, please send it to us. We'd love to see it. But just don't feel personally attacked if we make fun of something that you're kind of interested in.
Now, if it's from YouTube, we're probably going to ignore it.
Well, then...
Just saying.
So flat earth. A guy on the trip he doesn't believe in flat earth. But he was talking to us about, he just went on like a tear researching on the internet about what people believe about the Flat Earth Society. What do you know about the Flat Earth Society?
I don't know that the society really has that much influence. I think they're probably just like a small little group, but I think there's enough YouTube content out there that it just influences random people. And there's enough random people out there that I run into them, almost on a weekly basis.
Weekly, like in the real world?
No, well, I spend a lot of time chatting in Facebook groups about science and stuff like that.
Okay.
And so every once in a while, someone will come in and say, "Here's the definitive proof. Have you ever seen the horizon?" It just all the stuff that if you create a breadcrumb trail, it makes sense, kind of. But
it makes sense in a closed system where you're only looking at their evidence.
I can see why you feel convinced that way, but you skip the first premise, and that would have crumbled all the rest.
Mm-hmm. What's the basic premise of the Flat Earth Society, or any people who believe in the Flat Earth? I'm guessing there's probably like the Flat Earth Society, and there's probably someone who thinks they're crazy, but we have the real proof.
Yeah, I mean, it as with most conspiracy theories, it all relies on just a massive amount of covering up that has to be done. Like, not only do you have to cover up the fact that we don't have accurate, globes and stuff like that, it relies on not having satellites in outer space. It requires that we don't even really go to outer space, that we're only hitting a certain part of the...
We're still in the atmosphere, even when we think we're in space.
Which, of course, then, dominoes into there was no moon landing, and we don't have a space station, all these different things. And that airplanes only go so far, they don't travel around the world. I mean, when you start really unwinding the web of things that have to fall into place for this to be true, it's just like overwhelmingly... Why do you believe that?
Well, okay, so the way I understand it is the Earth is like a disc. Mm-hmm. The equator is the middle, more or less, and the poles are the edges. That's why when you get to the edges of the world, it's all ice and snow all the way around it. So when you're flying around the world, you're really flying in a circle, like on a dinner plate. Is that the way you understand it?
I mean, the ice is supposed to be so far when you get to the edge that you can't go past it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just too far. And, of course, in the government conspiracy, they won't allow you to fly that way. And there's certain, there's not flight patterns underneath certain parts of...
Does the government stop anyone from flying as far as they went north, or people just not do that because they don't want to die?
I don't know.
So my also understanding is it's like we're in a snow globe? Is that your understanding? Because
to some, that there's...
Because the stars aren't real, right? Space isn't real?
No, I don't know if that's the case.
Okay.
But the patterns of the moon and the sun are then elliptical above our head, so they're not, they're not going down and up necessarily. They're going around.
Which I guess, the sun orbits around the Earth.
Yeah, like if the Earth is here, it'd have to be moving like this because the Earth's not rotating.
the Earth couldn't be a disk that was just rotating around the sun?
No.
Huh.
Yeah.
Gravity is kind of a tenuous concept to these people.
Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean,
how many more times bigger is the sun than the Earth?
That's where, when you look at conspiracies that are, big conspiracies, you really have to suspend your disbelief on everything we've ever been taught, which is,
Well, everything you've ever been taught was from the government.
Well, I mean, but to be on a flat Earth, or to be on a ball Earth, you have to say, well, we don't feel ourselves moving, even though we know that gravity keeps us to that object and we're all moving at the same time, so we don't feel it. But that's another argument, is that you can't feel yourself moving on the Earth, even though we're supposed to be moving at, hundreds of thousand miles per hour around the sun.
Do you feel yourself moving in a car?
Oh, I do.
Well, no,
I drive pretty fast.
If you're in you feel yourself moving in a plane?
Yeah, I mean, the mentality is easy to understand. Your point of reference is, what's your point of reference?
I mean, what confuses me about the flat Earth is it's not like 9/11 conspiracy theories where there are two different human sides to the argument.
Yeah.
This is like, I feel like with science, what it should be is it's, us against the universe, not really. There's no other human side to this. Like, how do the round Earth people, how are they benefiting off the wool they've pulled over everyone's eyes? Like, why is it bad if the Earth is round or flat? Like, what difference would it make? Well, no, you know what I'm saying, but like, other than like gravity and how planets work and how we're not dead in the solar system and how this planet supports life, ignoring all that, from the people who live on the ground's perspective who are already here, why does it matter why would anyone want to convince you that the Earth is round when it's in fact flat?
There are reasons.
Yeah. What are their reasons? Do you know their reasons? Right. Okay. What confuses me is like,
I don't see the point of going through all this trouble. I mean, there's so
that's
many.
True.
If
that's true of most
if their
conspiracy
goal
theories.
is to convince somebody of something, there are other things they convince you of that would be more beneficial.
This seems like one of the most ridiculous things to try to convince people of, though, because like high school students can strap a GoPro to a weather balloon and send it up in the sky. And I realize it's a wide-angle lens, but still you can see the curvature of the Earth.
That's the thing. When you have the wide-angle lens, then people look at it and say, oh, well, look, all you have to do is straighten it out because you have a wide angle.
No.
So
do the flat Earth people believe in satellites?
They don't believe they're in outer space.
Gotcha, but there are satellites, they believe.
Yeah.
So when like Google Earth, they believe Google Earth is just you're up way above the Earth shooting pictures down at it.
Although it's not really... I don't know if they believe that's legit or not.
How can that be? You can go look at your own house.
Because it's wrapped around a globe. It could just be...
They could think it's a flat map that's wrapped around.
Composite of just images taken by different satellites.
Okay, they think they're real pictures, but the real pictures aren't being taken from that high up. Gotcha. Well, I mean, I guess from that perspective, that's not that ridiculous. We're assuming the premise could ever be real of flat Earth. I guess Google Earth wouldn't help disprove that, really, because you can just map that around a globe.
Well, here's the thing. When you are convinced of something, and whether it makes sense or not, it takes an overwhelming amount of evidence to convince you otherwise. Right. Especially when you get the mentality of there's a conspiracy behind it, because you then find yourself distrusting. You're distrusting of not only, say, scientists who, can tell you about how gravity works and how, a planet might be formed. You also have to be distrusting of, people who make satellites, send them into space. But once you become distrusting of everybody, any piece of evidence that comes to you at that point is
part of the conspiracy.
You're not going to trust it.
Right. And it's further proof that there is a conspiracy.
Right.
Because they're trying to keep you from the truth.
And there are conspiracies about conspiracy theories. Mm-hmm. There's a conspiracy that the people that do the flat Earth are basically doing it to make people look crazy, and it's not really... No one really believes it, but they've made the society to convince people that
other people are crazy?
Yeah, it's
well, that makes even less sense.
Yeah, it's so weird. I just read something about it. I can't remember it off the top of my head, but
what's another one that's easy to make fun of, or easy to not have any idea why it would be true? To me, chemtrails is one of the easiest.
Yeah, it's easy. It has. For me, I don't mind the ones that don't harm us. Mm-hmm. Like, if people want to believe in chemtrails and look up at the sky and believe the government's doing it to them, that's fine. As long as it doesn't lead them to some action.
Right. Well, what action are you going to take? Not flying a plane, I guess. I mean,
Well, not flying a plane and tell everybody that you know about chemtrails. I mean,
right.
What do you do at that point?
To me, the thing that doesn't make sense about that is, let's assume the government wanted to put mind control gas on us or whatever the chemicals that are in the chemtrails are. Wouldn't it be a lot easier just to put that in the drinking water that they are overseeing treating
Well, they
anyway?
did do that too with the fluoride.
Right. The fluoride that is poisoning our minds. But it just seems like that would be way easier because definitely everybody is drinking water at some point, or that water goes into stuff at some point.
Right.
Like, you can't escape treated water unless you have your own well out in the middle of the woods, and that's a relatively small percentage of people never come into contact with treated water. But I don't feel like there's much to say on chemtrails. Like,
They're silly.
it's such a basic argument for them that you either have to accept or reject that it'd be like the biggest cover up in the history of anything. That's the thing that never makes sense about conspiracy theories. Why are there so few people that are reputable that come forward? You know, if any of them are true, why do people believe the cover-ups are that successful? What has ever been successfully covered up that well?
I mean, even the things that, I mean, you look at the. I just finished listening to a great courses on skepticism, and it was talking about, you know, one of the real conspiracies, like Watergate.
Mm-hmm.
Like how easily that information leaked, and that was
Right.
a small group of people.
That was
But
a
it
tiny group of people.
But it was like the top of the nation. You don't get much higher than the president of, you know, the United States, and that information leaked out. How much easier would it be for something that was massive, global wide,
Right.
to get some defectors? And you do have people that claim that I have inside information, but
It's never reputable or provable.
it's always it's always the kooks. It's always the kooks.
Well, for me, the thing about chemtrails that, I mean, I guess for everybody it never makes sense is, with the cover-up, planes are designed to be as light as humanly possible.
Right.
Where are all these chemicals being stored? There's obviously not tanks underneath the planes because you can look at the plane and see it. Like, so, and then do people think, like, they're only carrying half gas and half mind control chemicals? Like, who's topping that up? Why has no engineer at an airport ever come forward and been like, hey, I don't put gas in planes, I put the whatever juice they tell me is good for the plane, but I don't believe them.
I mean, if you think about it, there's always an explanation. There's always an explanation for a conspiracy theory. Either, number one, you know, the people working on the planes are covering it up. But number two, maybe they just don't know.
Right.
I mean, who knows that component that you put in the airplane really does this? It could be for this other function that you just never know.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, to me, I mean, conspiracies do happen.
Right.
They obviously happen. We've had things come out that were not as they appeared. But when you take on the mentality of always looking at things as a conspiracy, you start to take on the mindset of nothing you see has to be believed by you.
Right.
So if it can be even as stupid as maybe there's only one engine on each side and that one of them is just for the chemtrails and it's holding a liquid.
I guess if you
even though an engineer could show you the blueprints and show
They
you,
could
well,
be
this is
lying.
what it does, they could be lying.
They could have just fudged all the numbers.
They could have so there's
Yeah.
literally, once you get to that mentality, you have to pull yourself back to get out of that, because a lot of times physical evidence, experts aren't going to matter.
Yeah, that's true.
I mean, taking it to a more serious topic, if we talk about vaccinations, that's been kind of a big thing in our country over the last few years. Like,
Well, we all know people who, probably a lot of us have family members who don't believe in vaccinations. I do.
yeah,
But, now see, with vaccinations, I think where more reasonable people can still be anti-vaccination people.
Mm-hmm.
So this is one of those things where it's not like Flat Earth Society where you look at them like, how on earth? With
Right.
vaccines, I can kind of get where people are coming from, and that there is always a chance that a vaccine will harm your child.
Right.
In some way, because it does happen. That's true with every medication,
Right.
every medical treatment. So in a sense, if your kid wasn't going to get sick already, and you vaccinate them and there is a chance of them getting sick, you've introduced a chance of causing more harm. But that's when you're only talking about your kid, if your kid lived in a bubble. So I kind of get where people are coming from, where they don't want to increase the risk that their kid would have an issue, even though the risk is infinitesimal, and even though the diseases they're trying to prevent are, generally affect many more of the population than would ever have a bad reaction to a vaccine.
The problem I have is the material that people go to get their information from. Mm-hmm. It's 10 times easier to find a mom blog talking about, natural ways to vaccinate your kid from, the measles or whatever. It takes more work to go through and actually read scientific studies.
Well, a lot of people aren't going to understand them. I mean, I probably
Right.
wouldn't understand a good chunk of it.
And so because one is written towards you,
Mm-hmm.
you're more inclined to believe matter-of-fact statements than someone giving you an actual realistic picture. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a thing with conspiracy theories too. Is you're looking at your sources, and one gets your attention, one speaks to you, one is you,
mm-hmm.
and then another, maybe a more legit source. It's boring. It's I'm not saying people are stupid and they can't read, but it doesn't speak to you.
It doesn't hook you. It doesn't get an emotional hook in you, or even an intellectual hook in you, because it's not written in a way that appeals to you or that makes sense to you or whatever. So you don't follow all the way through. You don't understand that as well as you understand the much simpler anti-vaccination argument.
And another big thing about conspiracy theories is that emotional appeal.
Yeah.
There's a certain degree of emotional, emotional poignancy that is really focused on. Like if you watch a video on YouTube, not only is it giving you information, it's got music playing, it's got interesting pictures. They know how to, not that they're trying to manipulate, but they know how to manipulate emotions,
right,
to get you to feel exactly what you want them to feel. And again, I don't think that's necessarily someone sitting behind a computer thinking, I want to lead them astray, because they probably believe all that stuff they're saying too.
Right. But it's well known to convince people of something. It's a lot easier if you can do an emotional and an intellectual appeal. You get their emotions all worked up, then you make a intellectual appeal that makes sense to them, and you're more likely to get them on board.
Right.
That's why
you're not thinking plot holes. You're thinking, oh man, this is coherent.
You're thinking, this makes a lot of sense. Follow this. Yeah. And with the vaccination thing, I guess, I'll just try to be devil's advocate here. I think, like my mom, I was vaccinated against measles, and I don't know what all. You probably know. You've had your kids have been vaccinated.
Yeah.
What all are they vaccinated for these days?
I had the measles, mumps, and rubella, I think.
Right, I definitely had that.
I think there's a couple
tetanus. I had tetanus, obviously. Yeah. I probably had half a dozen over the course of my childhood, different things I was vaccinated for. But I think there were like another 4 or 5 optional things that they said, like, it's not one of those, you better vaccinate your kid, but probably a good idea. But my mom, I think, looked into them, and she didn't see any convincing argument why it was like a realistic threat in America or something. And so she chose not to have us vaccinated, our first couple kids, because I think that's when some of those vaccines were newer, and there just wasn't really any information about the disease or why she'd want to vaccinate her kids against them. So she decided just to opt out for the time being.
Yeah.
And I think I might have gotten 1 or 2 of those at a later date. But like from that perspective, I don't even think that's unreasonable. Not like being vaccinated against malaria or something.
Right.
Measles, mumps, things that like were definite huge issues 100 years ago that aren't anymore. What disease has made a reoccurrence in America? It's fairly recent, like it's in the last year or so, isn't it? Okay. All right, so the disease is measles. According to the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, since the beginning of 2015, this article was written in 2015, 127 cases of measles in the United States have been linked to a Disneyland outbreak. Measles are a highly contagious virus that can be serious or even fatal. So that's one of the things where it's hard to get past a mother's or father's emotional appeal against vaccines by saying it's not just your kid, explaining herd immunity, because all the ones I know, at least personally, who don't believe in vaccines or don't believe in a good chunk of vaccines, it's not so much that, like, they understand herd immunity, but they think their kids are special somehow, and they don't want to put their kids in any additional danger, even if it helps kids around them.
But that is putting them in danger.
It is, right. Well, exactly.
Forget the fact that, forget the herd. Mm-hmm. You are now capable of catching measles stuff. You're able to catch these things. Likelihood of you catching them is low, but when you have enough people that don't protect against that, mm-hmm. Those strains are still out there, and maybe slightly mutated or whatever. Mm-hmm. But as you mentioned, that's for a disease that was pretty much eradicated.
Right.
For that many people to get it all at one time, I don't know. I think if anything, more testing should be done on vaccinations and how people react to the different chemicals in them.
Because I think it's very likely that it's not that people are having a bad reaction to the vaccine necessarily, but it could interact badly with other medications people are on. Right. One soapbox I don't necessarily want to get on today is I do think America runs to medicating things a little too quickly in a lot of cases, and it's obvious. It's well known that other medications interacting with each other is a serious issue for certain people at times, right, depending on what they're on. So I could see that even being a pretty reasonable offshoot of being anti-vaccination. It's one more thing that can be interacting with stuff in your body, but I don't think that means vaccines are bad. I think it just, like everything in the medical industry, it probably should be a little more transparent than it is if you want people to be on board.
For me as a parent, I just, I had a small period of time where I was leery of vaccines just mm-hmm. because they're my kids, and even the thought of something harming them was enough to convince me to be leery. Mm-hmm. But I did enough research to not be afraid, to not care, because it's a smaller form of a conspiracy, but it's still a conspiracy that, government's wiping under the rug, all the bad interactions and harming people, and it even goes up to the level of, back to the mind control of controlling your population type thing, mm-hmm. which people live and they die, and the next generation comes along, and when is that ever being fulfilled?
Right. Like, if you're going to make that argument, again, why did the government go through all that trouble? Go to the easy one. Like, look at food. That's something not everyone has to get vaccinated. Everybody will eat food at some point or another.
But we have those.
We do have those conspiracy theories, right? But why would anybody think it was vaccines over food, over something that everybody has to eat? And a lot of it, especially the cheapest, easy to get food, is some of the worst.
Right.
Which isn't a conspiracy. Like, that part's obvious, and nobody really disputes that. So, like, why would the government also do vaccines and also do chemtrails? Like, is there anybody who believes all of this? That's why I'd be curious.
I think once you believe one, you're more inclined.
Either more inclined to believe.
Anti-vaccination is kind of that's more culturally popular.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's as just deep into it as, say, chemtrails.
Right. I don't think as poorly. Well, that sounds wrong. I don't think as little of the critical thinking skills of someone who doesn't believe in vaccinations as I would flat Earth or chemtrails, right, or something. Because on most of the time, like, I haven't really met any strong anti-vaccination people who aren't parents, for example. Right. So it's one of the kind of, like, it's a conspiracy theory, but it's based in a real human concern. So, like, mm-hmm. I definitely think they're wrong and I don't agree with them, but I'm less concerned about that than somebody who believes that the government is just, like, brainwashing us just to have fun or something. Like, I don't know.
Now, what about aliens? What do you think about aliens?
What I think about it? I think I don't know. I don't think it's that crazy to think there could be aliens. I guess that's as definitive as I could be. Like, I think it would be awfully pompous of us to assume that we're the only planet that could get to us. We're the only planet within range of us, that could possibly have some sort of life on it. Yeah.
I guess not as the existence of aliens,
Okay.
but that we've been not only visited,
Okay.
but continually visited, and that there's a big cover-up involved in
Gotcha.
it.
Well, I guess if I was gonna put myself in the government shoes, if an alien creature did show up and let's say crashed in New Mexico, I would definitely want to do as much research as possible before letting the public find out about it. Like,
Right.
you'd want to know what you're dealing with, because when the public finds out about something, they're going to look to you for answers, and they're going to look to you to take care of it, because you're the government. Why do we pay you taxes? Why do we let you raise troops? Blah, blah, blah. You're supposed to protect us. So,
But if you look at Occam's razor, though, the simplest solution is usually the right.
right, yeah,
I mean, if you look at Area 51,
right.
there was a conspiracy involved, more than likely.
Covering up something or another.
But it wasn't necessarily a weather balloon. It was more than likely we were in the middle of the Cold War, and there was some kind of spy technology that we didn't want Russia to know about. So we're going to cover it up to be something even lesser than what it is. But once you have that little piece of mystery involved, that's where it becomes conflated with UFOs and outer worldly things, and not
Right.
trying to reason it out.
Right, well, and it's maybe easier to believe that it's something totally foreign to us, rather than, no, it is the government, but it's benign. Maybe
Right.
it's like, I don't know, the government doesn't keep us informed on everything they do because most people don't care or wouldn't understand, or, it's for the greater good or something. Like, there's a reason why most people aren't aware of most things that the government's doing. It's thousands and thousands and thousands of different little projects going at any one time that may or may not interest or affect you.
But a big part of that too has to be strategic advantage.
Yeah.
If we're ever in a war.
Yeah, any information we can find out, Joe Schmo on the internet can find out, any enemy could also find out.
Right.
So it's not like, oh, well, they're just going to tell the Americans. We deserve to know, but don't tell, like, our enemies. If it's secret, just tell us. Like, no, they can't tell anybody.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be covered up. It has to be. Because if we get in a war with the right group of people, we're going to need to use technology that we've probably never shown the public before, I
Right.
imagine.
I mean, so do you think all the 50s through 70s alien encounter stuff was all Cold War related, or mostly Cold War related?
I think it's mostly Cold War related, but once you get the idea of something in people's heads, it's easier for them to then assign agency to things that don't relate. And so, if I didn't know about UFOs and I saw something in the sky, I'm not going to think, alien UFOs.
Right.
If I didn't know about that, I'm not necessarily going to immediately look at something in the sky and think it's an alien UFO.
You think it's a weird airplane?
Yeah. But once you introduce that idea in my head, against better judgment, many people are going to jump immediately to that. I mean, there's natural phenomenon. It could be, there's any number. The list is so long of things that you should consider first before jumping to the alien UFO that people don't do those steps. They jump straight to, I don't know what that is. That's freaky. That's probably an alien aircraft. And so, I think it's a cultural thing ultimately.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I guess I kind of understand that. I mean, what do you think about people who say they've been abducted by aliens? Because the only part for me that doesn't really make sense with that is, from what I can tell, there have been plenty of cases where otherwise reportedly normal, average people who aren't necessarily interested in aliens seem to report having experience that sound very similar to other people who are interested in aliens, or who also weren't interested in aliens but had this happen to them. So it seems like either enough of it's similar that they are secretly interested in aliens and making it all up, or enough of it's similar because maybe a lot of these people have had a similar experience of some kind, alien or otherwise.
See, I think it has more to do with, like I said, the cultural. Because culturally we have that option. That's an option people
Aliens
can
are an
go
option.
to.
Yeah.
But the human brain is a weird thing. And,
It's true.
without following these people, without studying them before the things happened, it's impossible to necessarily know. And I mean, unless they're just flat out lying and then we catch them in a lie. It's hard to necessarily point out what could have happened in actuality. People that medically go under, a lot of times will see a light. They'll see different things. They'll have out-of-body experiences.
They write a book about having gone to heaven.
Yeah, but some of those were flat-out fiction.
Right.
And one person admitted it was a fiction. They made it up to get notoriety. But a lot of it is your brain reacts certain ways. There's a phenomenon that, like out-of-body experience is a phenomenon that disconnects you from recognition of self.
Right.
And that could be a lot of what happens. I mean, when you become sleep deprived, your brain does things that you feel very real to you, but don't necessarily actually happen. And so I think there's more cases of that than anything. But without actually following these people around, maybe they've got insomnia. Maybe they have issues. There's any number of...
Sleep paralysis.
Sleep paralysis is...
That seems like the most likely when people report like they're awake and stuff's happening to them and they don't know about it. Like we know there's been cases where people have been operated on and the anesthesia did not work right. And they were like awake for their surgery, which sounds horrible. Or people who just wake up at home and can't move and they feel like they're paralyzed and they blame it on, some demon attacked them or some aliens holding them down or whatever. But that's a real thing that happens is people, it's not scary, it's just something you don't understand about your body. Yeah. So do you think it's possible that some of that, maybe if someone had something like that happen, that was also happened at the same time as another weird experience?
Yeah, it's the thing. It could be a series of coincidences that just happen at the right time for you to then accept that.
Now what about, this seems to be a fairly common aspect of an alien abduction story, is like someone's driving along a county road, they're out in the middle of nowhere, there's lights, and then they just wake up 2 hours later nearby. Like, what do you think that could be? What do you think is it? Because there have been, I guess, from what I've seen, there's been quite a few cases where, again, and quite a few is, maybe a dozen, but otherwise normal people who don't seem to have an inclination towards believing in aliens or being super interested in aliens have had stuff like this happen to them, so they say. What do you think that could be? It's one thing like if you're lying at home and the aliens come and take you. It's another thing if you're driving on a road, and the aliens come and take you. That's a little harder to explain other than like you just drive your truck into something and pass out.
Well, I think it could be any number of things. Honestly, the person could have just been really tired, drove home, got in their bed,
and not about it. That's true.
There are times when I'm driving, and 10 minutes has gone by, and I don't realize that I've been doing it, but I don't feel like I've been actively looking at the road, like watching the person.
Well, your brain can tune that out. That's a real thing.
I feel like I've been, I had like a complete mental takeover of what I was thinking about. Like the imagery was just what I was thinking about, and my eyes are still working, stopping when I need to or getting over if I need to, but I'm just not thinking about it so much that it doesn't feel like it happened. It feels like a lost period of time, and that's one of the common things is there's this lost period of time. I don't know. But I have to think that our government would have some form of technology to be able to track all these UFOs and to get them out of the air.
Right.
If they're able to get in all these different airspaces, why aren't we hearing more jets scrambling? Why aren't we... Why isn't there more public awareness, honestly? Because, honestly, if we're having aliens visit that are experimenting on people,
right,
that's a public concern. Right. That's not, we've been visited, we're in talks with aliens, but we want to let the public know yet. This is, don't go out on this road alone at night. These are the areas to avoid type thing.
But I can see them saying they want to avoid mass hysteria or something. Like, because if you did tell people something weird is going along this road at night, don't drive there, there's going to be hundreds of people driving along that road because humans are humans.
But it's always at night.
Yeah. Well, if I was an alien, that's when I would choose to abduct people. Everybody has a cell phone these days with a high definition camera in it, pretty much. Why aren't we seeing more?
Everything is so shaky. Like,
yeah, it's different. It's different when it's the 50s. You got a camcorder from the 50s or a movie camera, and there's the blurry footage of Bigfoot or some sort of thing in the sky. Right. But like these days, it's a little bit harder to.
And enough people drive with cameras in their cars now too. Heck, I guess aliens never go to Russia because they always seem to have...
They're required to have dash cams, I think. Yeah. I don't know.
Has it never happened to a police officer? Has it never happened... to anybody that would have any kind of evidence to show that this happened? Or is it always just these random cases?
Yeah.
So.
Well, I guess that's where it gets back into conspiracy theory. Maybe it has happened, but it's been covered up because it's easier to dismiss the loons who live out in the boonies who get abducted by aliens, and it's a lot harder, like, say, like, a senator got abducted, or it happened, say, in London where there's cameras on every street corner, you know, somewhere where, like, people would obviously find out. That's when you would need to sweep it under the rug. But then it goes back to...
But the amount of sweeping you would have to
you
do.
would be sweeping
it's
constantly.
not just wiping a city's cameras. It's, you know, news stations have traffic cameras. And, you know, any kind of anomaly like that could trigger something in a missile defense or...
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many pieces that would have to fall into place often for any conspiracy that it's more reasonable to dismiss the fantastic claims than it is to accept the fantastic claims, but then realize the mound of things you'd have to all line up just to make it happen.
I think that's at the core of most conspiracy theories, or the issues with most conspiracy theories, is the sheer ridiculous amount of things that all have to work out just the way you think they do. But why do you think why do people want to believe in conspiracy theories? Otherwise reasonable people, like, there's always some fringe 0.1% of people who are crazy when it comes to a certain thing.
Right.
Dismissing them, people who have serious mental issues, and that's not something we'd want to make fun of or anything. People who are otherwise normal, who seem to believe one really weird, crazy, out there thing that's a cover-up or a conspiracy or something like that. Why would people want to believe that?
I think it appeals to our desire to have some kind of inside knowledge about something. I know something everybody else doesn't know. I'm one of the few people that know the real truth.
Which I think is probably the same thing as knowing gossip.
Yeah.
Just on a maybe more serious scale.
Yeah, it's appealing. It's appealing to feel like you've gained some knowledge someone else doesn't have. I don't know, and I think, humans are inclined to assign agency to things that aren't necessarily there. We're pattern recognizers by nature, and we put together puzzle pieces that don't fit together. The saying correlation doesn't equal causation. Some things do correlate, but that's not what it's supposed to mean. So I think we're wired that way, and I think it's just kind of fun. I mean, I love a good conspiracy theory. That's why I like reading about them.
Yeah, it's fun to go down the rabbit hole for an hour of Wikipedia, but that,
But then you have to say to yourself, okay, this is BS. I need to move on with my life. But now I know about it enough to talk about it some other time. I think the internet's made it, drastically worse, too. And I can't speak necessarily from a time before the internet. Even though it was born before the internet became, popular.
Right.
That's always been a part of my life, and so a big majority of my information gathering is going to the internet. Even if it's a scholarly source, it's still going to the internet. And so, but now that we have this just massive freedom of information, I think it's just so much easier for two people to pick up on something, and then those two people tell people, and then it just becomes like this.
It should be so much easier for people to debunk it, though.
Well, the information's there.
Right.
There's always some information out there to debunk something. But once you get that in your head that I have this inside knowledge that somebody's lying to me, I'm going to have to start doubting this person that's going to give me my rebuttal.
Right.
I'm going to have to start doubting the people that gave that little piece of information. So that's where it grows. And that's where you have to either say the world is just full of conspiracies and we don't know anything, or you have to become skeptical and say, does this meet the criteria of being good information? Is it more reasonable to believe this? And what would be the amount of effort that would take to cover this up to make it, seem true? So, that's my thought.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I also think everyone wants to feel a little bit special. So,
the elite.
It's one thing if we're on a rock alone in the universe. It's another thing if aliens are interested in coming to see us. It's one thing if the government is just a group of people like us doing the best they can or doing a really poor job of trying to take care of the country. It's another thing to believe that we are somehow special enough or potentially dangerous enough that the government would fear us enough to take preventative steps towards making sure we can never take them down. Which, again, assumes the government is like this one single entity.
Right.
Rather than a spider web.
Watch a bill. Watch a bill going.
But, so like, I guess people want to feel like they matter and have a purpose. Not to make fun of those people, but, I think you and I both agree it's much more likely. There is a reason behind everything. Everything does happen for a reason, but you said it.
That reason is something caused it.
Yeah.
It's cause and effect. It's not necessarily a nefarious plot.
And sometimes it could be the government doing something.
Things do happen. Conspiracies do happen.
Mm-hmm. There's very credible evidence that, like, the CIA introduced crack to America. And that... It's very, there's a lot of really smoking guns, credible smoking guns on that, but it's one of those things like there never will be any more proof. We know all we'll ever know. Oh, well. There's really, I guess most of the ones I kind of believe in have to do with the military, just because I know there's enough evidence out there that not that the military does bad things all the time, but that they're not as forthcoming with things as people would want them to be. So
there's a lot more political strategy involved than what we know of.
People want to believe America, a lot of Americans want to believe America is a giant global force for good, blah, 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 where the truth is a lot more gray, where we mostly look after America's interests first, just like most every other country does.
Right.
And because of that, there are sometimes horrible things that happen that do get swept under the rug, and there are real conspiracies for sure.
I mean, that's part of being skeptical.
Yeah. Don't believe the official story necessarily, but if you don't believe it, you got to have a really good reason why you don't.
Right. And in being skeptical doesn't mean you doubt everything. I mean, you still believe stuff. You believe things, but just, base it on certain criteria. Form your criteria of things that will keep you from believing just anything, but at the same time keep you from dismissing things that are actually true.
Mm-hmm. It'd be slow to make decisions on stuff.
Yeah.
If it's not, most things are not life or death. You got to make a decision right this minute. There are most things in life, you have plenty of time to research it and figure stuff out before you make a big decision about it. And when it comes to things like conspiracy theories, whether or not you make a decision doesn't really change reality.
Right.
So take as much time as you want, and then just try not to force that down anyone's throat while you're deciding.
Although jumping into a conspiracy theory can have effects on your,
That's
on
true.
you. I mean, stressing, anxiety you don't need. I mean,
you could vote for a crazy person for president because you're worried about all the conspiracy theories.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, more than likely you're gonna live and then die of whatever is gonna happen to you, and none of that stuff will matter by the time you're old. So.
And you believing it or not believing it will probably have little consequence at the world at large.
Yeah.
Which is not. That sounds very fatalistic, but I mean, in a good way, you're not going to have that big of an impact on the world. Most people won't.
Yeah.
Which means, on the positive side, is you can kind of do whatever you want for the most part, as long as you're not hurting other people. It's not really going to affect the world that much. But the negative side, I guess, for some people would be they're not going to have as much of an impact as they want to.
Yeah.
But believing conspiracy theories one way or the other probably won't make that much of a difference. Now, it makes a difference when it comes to vaccines. Obviously, that makes a very people are dying. That's a real difference. It makes a difference maybe when it comes to a religious war, of which there have been hundreds throughout history. That makes a real difference in the world. Believing that the world is flat, I somehow doubt any of those people are going to be in a position where that's going to majorly screw stuff up.
But it's entertaining for the rest of us.
It is entertaining, but I don't think any of those people would ever be working for NASA or something. So they're not really going to cause any harm, most likely. That doesn't affect how you pay your taxes or contribute to society or be nice to people.
The only fear I have is when conspiracies and pseudoscience get big enough, then you have people start saying we need to
do something.
We need to teach this. We need to do this.
Oh, yeah.
People need to know about this. This is valid. This is just as valid as what you're telling me.
Because all those other people
Yeah.
All these other people think it's true.
Yeah, so that's the only thing. If something gets big enough, then it becomes revisionary or it becomes pseudoscientific. Like
9/11 conspiracy theories.
Yeah, I mean,
Few, I think conspiracies have captured American interest like that.
but imagine, so say in our lifetime, nothing comes of it.
Right.
But imagine in 200 years, people are looking back and they're talking about history, and they're only teaching the conspiracy.
Or they're teaching it alongside it as equally valid. Like, this happened. A lot of people think the government was behind it.
Right.
When it was never, it's never proven one way or the other.
That starts to form a mentality.
That does.
Whether you see it necessarily or not, you're subconsciously becoming distrusting of whatever story you're told.
Well, we can already see that with the Civil War.
Yeah.
That's one of the most argued about wars. Like, there are some people who believe it was entirely about the good old North wanting to free all the slaves in the South. And then there are plenty of people who believe that it was just the South fighting for their own states' rights and they wanted to stop being stepped on by the North. And there's people who believe Lincoln was a giant racist who...
And the people of the South just wanted to keep their slaves. That's
and the truth is always a lot more gray and a lot more in between. But a lot of those, like, there are people who make it through their every history class they'll ever take, and they're taught one of those, or one or two of those, and they'll grow up thinking that half the country was fighting the other half because of this reason.
Yeah.
And not because of a multitude of different reasons by a multitude of different people who had a multitude of different motivations to be involved. In a war where you maybe can't really not pick a side, where you have to pick a side, there's going to be 1,000 different reasons why people are doing stuff. And war is one of those things that has a lot of conspiracy theories around it, but the more you look into any one war, it's almost never a so-and-so just decided to attack so-and-so because why not? It's always like World War I. I'm going through a great podcast series, Dan Carlin's Hardcore History. And I never learned that much about World War I. It was more popular to learn about World War II. Because World War II has seemingly had a more effect on the rest of the 20th century.
Yeah.
Although World War II was completely set up by World War I. But the thing in World War I is like one relatively major event happened, but then the war was a result of everybody reacting to that by trying to guess what everyone else was going to do.
Right.
And that's how Germany just started swinging. And its allies just started swinging at countries around it, and then other people got dragged into the fight, and like most things, it just snowballed out of control. But like, there's not one reason why that war happened, a war that millions of people died in. There's not one reason, there's not one thing. But if you live in one country, you probably have been taught an entirely different reason about why things happen. Well, we have British friends, and what they're taught about the Revolutionary War is surprisingly, or not surprisingly, a lot different than what America is taught about the Revolutionary War. So, yeah, conspiracies are all well and good unless it makes it into public policy, or, which it does plenty of time, public policy, or affects the decision-making capabilities of people who make very important decisions, and that's a big deal.
That's kind of a big deal. I would say one of my thoughts to leave with is that anytime I learn new information, the first thing I do is look at rebuttals. I look at the arguments against it and use that to see how good is the opposition to something. Because it's easy to read an argument and be convinced if you don't listen to any reasons why not to believe that.
Right.
So, I say, in being skeptical, look at all your sources. Look at all the dissenters that say that's just stupid.
And look at what the motivations would be of anyone making a claim. Because that's another big thing is, if any, like especially a corporation or a person who might get money from a corporation of some kind is making strong claims about your water or your food or your healthcare or something else, you might want to look at where do they get money, where do they get power or influence, and might that have anything to do with the thing they're talking about? Because if it does, they may not be as unbiased as you want them to be, even if they're agreeing with you. And that's kind of the problem with the internet. Like you referenced mommy blogs earlier, that anybody can have a voice, and there are plenty of people who have very big voices on the internet who otherwise never would have gotten them.
Right.
They have the big voice because of good characteristics, because they're engaging and they're interesting.
Right.
And maybe they have a lot of really awesome stuff to talk about, but you can give someone an artificially big voice, and then you wonder why are they saying such crazy things, which we see all the time with celebrities. You know, people are always shocked when a celebrity turns out to be kind of nuts or believes some stuff that are kind of nuts. But like, especially like when it comes to an actor, if you became famous because you're a good actor, like that doesn't make you an amazing person.
That makes you the most amazing truth teller.
Yeah, you're just famous for some reason. Like it doesn't mean your voice should carry necessarily more weight than anyone else's, but of course it does. So, which, I mean, is actually how the whole anti-vaccination thing got started.
Yeah.
The modern anti-vaccination.
It took just enough famous people to say it.
Yeah, so, I don't know. Be skeptical. Always check your sources.
And just enjoy life.
I realize that most of it doesn't really matter anyway. Even if the government is controlling me or whatever.
They're not doing such a bad job.
Yeah, they're not doing such a bad job, and they're not really doing a great job of it. Maybe all my decisions are being made for me by someone else through chemicals that are being sprayed on my face and stuff, but I feel like I have enough agency to be happy. So would I be more happy if I knew more? Maybe, but you know, I'm going to enjoy where I am now. I know if I was super into conspiracy theories, I'd be miserable. So I'd rather know a little more and be less miserable, or know a little less, I guess, and be less miserable at times.
All right. Till next time. See you
Bye.
guys.